I used to think the worst thing in a family was constant arguing or long, cold silences. But I was wrong. For me, the tragedy began when even my breath had to ask permission from someone else. My parents put a strange house rule in place. Every medical decision about me had to be approved by my twin sister Haley. And on that fateful night, when I had an asthma attack, my lips turning blue and I collapsed, Haley casually said I was faking it. My parents believed her. They forbade calling for emergency services. My heart stopped for 4 minutes until a friend rushed in and administered emergency aid on the spot. From then on, CPS and doctors began uncovering a whole chain of years of neglect, and this time, the very people who once ignored my life are the ones paying the price. Have you ever felt your existence or your pain dismissed by your own family? Please share, and tell me where you are watching this from because I really want to know how far this story will reach. Thank you so much. Hi, my name is Madison Lee, though people usually call me Maddie. I am 16 years old, a junior at Rainier High, an ordinary public school in Bellevue, a suburb of Seattle. From the outside, my family looked no different from other middle-class families. My father, Thomas Lee, worked long hours as a retail manager at a furniture store. My mother, Angela, was a marketing assistant at a local company, always busy with a packed schedule and back-to-back Zoom meetings. As for me, I lived in the huge shadow of my twin sister Haley Lee, the golden twin in the eyes of our parents and the community. Haley pursued modeling early, with a slender frame, a camera smile that was always radiant, and an Instagram full of carefully edited photos. She became the pride of the family, the ticket my parents used to show off to neighbors and coworkers. I was just the other one. From the age of 12, a strange rule appeared in my family that still gives me chills to think about. The house rule, as my father called it, stated that every decision related to my health had to be approved by Haley. It sounded absurd, but to my parents, it became a management tool they believed was reasonable after an incident I will never forget. That day I ran a fever, coughed hard, and had chest pain right before Haley's dance competition. I swear I was genuinely sick, but Haley shouted that I was faking it to ruin the most important day of her life. My parents took her side immediately, making me sit quietly in the audience while each breath felt like a knife in my chest. Haley won the prize, and from that day on, my parents instituted the so-called house rule. If I felt ill, I had to ask Haley's permission before taking medicine, seeing a doctor, or going to the hospital. From then on, I entered years where every asthma flare, every sore throat, every headache was filtered through one person: Haley. When I started wheezing, my chest tight and the peak flow meter the doctor had given me flashed a low red warning, I would panic and go to my mother. But instead of giving me medicine, she would turn and ask, "Haley, does she really need it?" And if Haley merely shook her head, I was labeled attention-seeking. Those were 3 words I heard so often. I almost believed I was just a troublemaker. There were nights I sat alone in my room listening to the wheeze echo from my chest like a tiny fire alarm that nobody cared about. In my family, my inhaler was never really mine. It wasn't in my bedside drawer or in my school backpack. My mother kept it in her purse like some kind of control device. I wasn't allowed to touch it unless Haley permitted me. That turned every asthma attack into a roll of the dice, a gamble where I never held the cards. On damp mornings, I would hold the stopwatch in my hand, counting the seconds to see how long I could endure before my chest completely tightened. I had no idea that one day that countdown would become a nightmare. 4 minutes, my heart stopped, and every warning I had given became true. Haley lived in the flash of cameras while I was pushed into the shadows. I had no right to speak for my own body. While she practiced her catwalk in the living room, I tried to breathe through an imaginary straw, each breath forced through a tiny hole. My parents would say, "Maddie always exaggerates. We don't want her to ruin Haley's opportunity." Little by little, every clear medical sign, high fevers, wheezing, blue lips, was dismissed as a stunt. In their eyes, I wasn't a patient who needed help. I was just the annoying twin standing in the way of the golden twin. If anyone out there asks me, "Why didn't you fight back? Why didn't you hide your medicine for yourself?" I want to know the answer too. Part of it was that I was too small, too afraid of being branded a liar. Part of it was that as a teenager, when your own parents take your sister's side, you learn to stay silent, to endure so you don't spark more anger. But silence can kill you. I understood that on the night the stopwatch in my hand stopped at 4 minutes. Haley's Sweet 16 was held at a fancy rooftop studio overlooking South Lake Union. It was still cold in March, the lake breeze carrying moisture, but inside the glass room with neon lights and EDM beats it felt like another world. Glittering dresses, fog machines running constantly, a 3-tiered cake centered in the room, and a gold-lettered photo backdrop that read Haley's Sweet 16. I stood in a corner in the pale blue dress my mother had hurriedly picked up at a discount store. Nobody cared what I was wearing. Tonight was only about Haley. I had learned to keep quiet at events like this. But the moment the lighting crew ramped up the fog and the indoor sparklers flared beside the cake, my chest tightened. At first there was a small whistle, like wind leaking through a straw, then my breaths grew labored. I knew what was coming. Asthma waits for no one, and artificial smoke is enemy number one. My hand went into my coat pocket for my inhaler, but it wasn't there. I remembered. My mother had put it in her purse when she got out of the car. I pushed through the crowd to find her. "Mom, I need my inhaler," I whispered, my voice strangled. My mother glanced at me once, then turned to Haley, who was beaming in front of the camera of a scout from a Seattle agency. "Haley, does your sister really need it?" Haley didn't even bother to look back, just adjusted her hair and replied curtly, "She's fine." My mother snapped her purse shut, her voice hard. "Haley says you're fine, Maddie. Don't ruin the party." My father echoed the familiar refrain. "House rule, Maddie, you know that." I staggered backward, struggling to draw in what little air I could. A violent cough seized me, pain stabbing my chest. I leaned against the glass wall, trying to steady myself, but every breath felt trapped in a narrow plastic tube. My face burned hot, my head spun. Guests kept taking photos, the music kept pounding. No one noticed me until a strange sound cut through. I started coughing up blood. Dark red drops splattered across my trembling hand, and I wanted to scream, but my throat locked tight. Veronica Ramirez, my classmate, happened to turn around at that moment. She was studying pre-med and had once proudly told me she was CPR certified. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God, Maddie, you're not okay." She rushed to me, grabbed my wrist to check my pulse, her face draining of color. Pulse racing. Respiratory failure. She pulled out her phone, but my father blocked her instantly. No calling 911 without Haley's approval. His voice was a growl, as if Veronica had just broken an unshakable law. Rowan Parker, my childhood friend who was taking photos at the party, dropped his camera and pushed through to my side. "Her lips are turning blue," Rowan shouted. But Haley immediately stepped between us, blocking my parents' view. "She's faking." "It's nothing serious," Haley snapped. She shot me a look of pure fire, as if I were the one ruining the most important night of her life. The room erupted into chaos. Some guests stepped back and whispered. A lighting technician nearby accidentally captured footage of me coughing up blood, Veronica's panicked voice echoing in the background. I felt my vision blur and my head spin. My nails had gone blue, my chest felt crushed under a heavy stone. I reached for my mother, but she stepped away, her eyes fixed on the lights and the cameras aimed at Haley. Then everything went black. I stopped breathing. There was no wheeze, no rasp, only absolute silence. I collapsed to the floor, my head striking the cold tile. In that moment, the whole world disappeared. Veronica screamed, her voice piercing. "She's not breathing." She dropped to her knees and laced her hands over my chest, starting chest compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. Her rapid counting mixed with ragged breaths. Rowan knelt beside her, doing his best to clear space for Veronica to work. "Someone get her inhaler," Rowan yelled, but no one in my family moved. Instead of calling for help, my father barked at Veronica. "Stop, Haley said she's faking it." Veronica shouted back, unable to contain herself. Are you insane? She's dying right in front of us. Then she kept pressing on my chest, refusing to let go even as my father tried to rip the phone from her hand. Around us the guests were in chaos, some backing all the way to the door, others arguing and shouting. In all that noise and panic, the only steady thing was Veronica's hands pressing rhythmically on my chest, fighting to pull me back. I heard nothing anymore. My world had gone dark. I woke up in a world that felt completely foreign. The first thing I registered wasn't the face of anyone familiar, but the steady beeping of the monitor by my bed. The sound was strange and terrifying, a reminder that my heart had once stopped. Harsh fluorescent lights glared down from the hospital ceiling, the sharp smell of antiseptic filled the air. And a web of tubes and wires connected my body to machines, an oxygen line in my nose, a pulse oximeter clipped to my finger, an IV running into my left wrist. I couldn't move right away, each breath still felt like fire, but at least I knew I was alive. A doctor in a white coat entered, his eyes stern but patient. He introduced himself as Dr. David Chen, the ICU physician on duty that night. He sat down, his voice deep and steady. Madison, your heart stopped for 4 minutes before we were able to bring you back. The emergency team had to perform continuous CPR along with adrenaline injections. You are extremely lucky because at your age, 4 minutes without oxygen can cause permanent brain damage. His words made my whole body go cold. He went on to explain that I would need a series of neurological tests from eye reflexes and motor functions to simple memory exercises like counting backward from 10 or recalling my date of birth. As soon as I tried to lift my right hand, a nurse quickly noted on the chart, 3:17 a.m. Patient regained consciousness, heart rate 88, SPO 294%. I could hear the scratch of her pen on paper, each number a piece of evidence documenting the moment my life was pulled back. The nurse, her name was Amanda, asked me basic questions. Do you remember what day it is? Do you feel any numbness in your fingertips or toes? I answered with difficulty, my voice hoarse and broken, but to them it was a hopeful sign. I was in the ICU at the University of Washington Medical Center, where the procedures for reporting suspected homicide or abuse cases are extremely strict. When Dr. Chen heard the initial account from the witnesses Veronica and Rowan, he immediately filled out the mandatory reporting protocol form. This is Washington state law. Any healthcare professional who suspects severe medical neglect of a minor is required to report it to CPS, Child Protective Services. There is no room for hesitation. In my file, under the column, Incident Timestamp, they wrote 2340. 2. Patient stopped breathing, CPR initiated, 2340. 6. EMS arrived on scene, 2349. ROSC, return of spontaneous circulation. These timestamps became undeniable proof that my heart had truly stopped for 4 minutes. The next morning, when Seattle's gray sunlight filtered through the hospital window, my parents finally walked into the ICU. My mother's makeup was smudged as if she had been crying, and my father was silent, his face heavy. But the first words out of their mouths were not, "Are you okay?" Instead, they said, "You ruined your sister's night." Haley lost her contract with the Scout because of this scene. I wanted to scream, to ask them how much my life was worth compared to a hollow modeling promise, but my throat locked tight. The only sound was the steady beeping of the monitor answering in my place. Amanda stood nearby, her eyes filled with disbelief at what she had just heard. Quietly, she wrote another line in the file. Parents expressed anger over disruption of siblings' event, no expression of concern for patient's condition. For the first time in my life, I realized the truth was no longer trapped inside my memory, it had been witnessed and recorded by someone else. When my parents continued to repeat, "You always exaggerate, you just want attention," Dr. Chen walked in and cut them off immediately. "You both need to understand. This was not an act." Madison stopped breathing, her heart stopped. We had to save her life. This will be reported to CPS as required. His voice was firm, leaving a heavy silence hanging in the room. My mother's face drained of color, my father gripped the chair arm tightly, but neither of them dared to argue. After my parents left, Amanda came back to my bedside, her voice soft. "Madison, the doctor and I need to know more about your medical history. Have you ever been denied treatment before?" I stared up at the ceiling, tears sliding down my cheeks, then nodded. I told her, piece by piece, the memories I had tried so hard to bury, the time I had strep throat but had to wait 2 weeks because Haley said I was faking. The time I broke a finger in a bike accident but was forced to sit and wait until my sister returned from a sleepover before being taken for an x-ray. The time I had a fever over 103 degrees right in the middle of Haley's middle school graduation but was told to endure it because no one was allowed to steal the spotlight. Amanda recorded everything, every detail, into the official report. I knew that with each line she wrote, I was laying another brick in the wall of truth against my parents. On the very first night after I regained consciousness, Veronica sat in the hospital hallway, writing by hand in a small notebook all the vital signs she had managed to measure right before the ambulance arrived. My heart rate had spiked past 160, my oxygen level had dropped into the danger zone, my lips had turned blue, my pulse was rapid and weak. She used her pre-med training to document it all clearly, minute by minute, second by second. Then she handed the record to Dr. Chen while keeping a copy to forward to CPS. Veronica's methodical approach turned the chaos of the party into precise medical data that no one could dismiss. Rowan didn't stay silent either. He had been hired as a secondary photographer for the party, so he had both a camera and an audio mic running. When the chaos broke out, he accidentally captured the exact moment my father yanked the phone out of Veronica's hand, his voice crystal clear, "No calling 911 unless Haley says so." That audio, combined with the sound of my wheezing and Veronica shouting respiratory failure, became the most damning evidence against my parents. Rowan immediately made a copy of the video file, saved it on both the memory card and the cloud, and handed it to Dr. Chen to be placed into my hospital record. The doctor stated plainly, "This is forensic evidence. No one can ever claim she was faking again." Less than 24 hours later, CPS sent a caseworker to the hospital. Her name was Camila Duarte, in her 30s, wearing a pale blue shirt and carrying a thick folder. Her voice was low and warm, so different from the cold looks I had grown used to from my parents. Camila sat down beside my bed, introduced herself, and gently began a series of questions. She asked about my medical history, how many times I had been denied treatment, the specific symptoms, and the consequences. I told her about the time I had a 103-degree fever throughout Haley's middle school graduation, the time I broke a finger but was forced to wait all night until my sister finished her sleepover party before being taken for an x-ray, the time I had a severe peanut allergy reaction but wasn't allowed to take medication until Haley approved. Camila listened carefully, taking notes, her face gradually tightening. Then she asked a nurse to help document the physical traces left on my body. The rough patches on my arm from untreated infected dermatitis, the slightly crooked joint from a fracture that healed late, and the faint marks in my throat from prolonged untreated tonsillitis. Camila explained, "We need every piece of physical evidence. This can't just be your word against theirs, it has to be clear data proving neglect." It didn't stop there, she also contacted Rainier High directly. A day later, Counselor Olivia Watson sent Camila old emails teachers had written. Notices that I had missed many days due to shortness of breath, suspected asthma, and comments that I frequently seemed exhausted in class. Those small reports, which my parents had dismissed as made up to skip school, suddenly became important pieces of the file. Camila compiled them into a thick packet labeled, "Supporting Evidence, School Records." One detail that made my skin crawl was when Camila asked me to produce any medical devices I had used to track my condition. I thought of the old peak flow meter my family doctor had given me 2 years earlier. It was still in the desk drawer at home, with a few log sheets where I had secretly recorded my readings in pencil. The numbers were often below 250, many times in the red zone. I had never dared show them to my parents because I knew they would laugh. When I told her, Camila said, "We will seek an order to seize this evidence. This is the respiratory action log and it will match your testimony." The interview ended with Camila standing up, looking me straight in the eye, and saying, "Temporarily, you will not be returning home. We will file for an emergency protective order to prevent your parents from taking you out of the hospital until the risk assessment is complete." I froze. In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. For the first time, someone outside my family believed me and was taking steps to protect me from that terrible loop. When Camila left, I lay in the gleaming ICU room, listening to the steady rhythm of the monitor, my heart both trembling and relieved. The pieces, Veronica's notes, Rowan's video and audio, the old respiratory log, the teacher's emails, and my own testimony had all come together into a picture that could not be denied. My family could keep denying, could keep calling me a faker, but, this time, the records spoke for me. And CPS had officially stepped in. I closed my eyes, hearing again the words Dr. Chen had told me. "Those 4 minutes were enough to take everything away, Maddie. But they're also enough to change everything." I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, my life would no longer be dictated by Haley's careless answers. On the 3rd day after I was saved, a respiratory specialist entered my hospital room. He introduced himself as Dr. Elias Mercer, a leading asthma expert at the University of Washington Medical Center. His presence wasn't stern the way I imagined. Instead, he was calm, warm, his voice steady and decisive. He sat down beside my bed and spread out a set of colored papers clearly divided into 3 zones: green, yellow, and red. "Madison, this is your asthma action plan from now on," he said. "We will never again let your condition depend on anyone but you. You must learn to read your own body and know that you have the right to decide." He explained everything carefully. The green zone means my peak flow readings are within the normal range for my age and height. The number should be between 380 and 400. If I reach that level when I blow, it means my lungs are stable. The yellow zone is when the number drops, around 250, 300, signaling that an asthma episode may be approaching, so I need to be alert and use additional medication. The red zone is anything below 200, a dangerous level that requires immediate use of the rescue inhaler and going to the emergency room. He had me try the peak flow meter right there in the hospital bed. The result was only 240. He frowned. "This shows your lungs have chronic damage from years of not being properly treated. You're functioning at about 60% of a healthy person," he said. I trembled when I saw the number, because for the first time someone pointed out the harsh reality to me, but Dr. Mercer didn't let me sink into despair. He taught me how to use a spacer so the inhaler would work at maximum effect. He showed me to seal my lips around the mouthpiece, press once and inhale deeply, hold the breath in my lungs for a few seconds, then exhale. He gave me a whole kit, 3 inhalers, not just one. A maintenance inhaler for daily use, a rescue inhaler for emergencies, and a spare to keep in my school backpack. He also wrote a prescription for another set to keep at Veronica's house in case I was there. "You will never have to beg anyone to breathe again," he said, looking straight at me and enunciating each word. While I was still overwhelmed, the CPS caseworker Camila returned and delivered the official decision. I would not be going back to my parents' home after discharge. Instead, CPS had approved a temporary placement with Veronica's family in Bellevue. Her family had agreed and passed the home check-a process where a social worker inspects the bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, and interviews the parents about their jobs and daily schedules. Everything met the requirements. Camila said, "We want you in a safe and stable environment, somewhere no one can ever take your medication away again." I turned to Veronica, who smiled and held my hand, and for the first time I felt what it was like to have a place that could be called home, even without blood ties. But my parents did not give up. The next day, during their visit, they completely changed their tone. My mother cried, begging me to tell the doctors it had all been a misunderstanding. My father was colder, leaning in to whisper, "If you keep resisting, we'll cut off your entire college fund. Let's see where you end up then." That threat repeated itself, But this time I didn't crumble. I had hidden my phone under the blanket, recording with the voice memo app the whole time. Every word was captured, becoming part of the evidence chain that Camila and I were quietly building. When my parents left, I emailed the file to Camila through a secure channel. She replied briefly, "Good job, Maddie. We're going to need this." A week later, I left the ICU, was moved to the recovery ward, and then finally discharged. Veronica and her mother, Mrs. Ramirez, came to pick me up in their old but spotless SUV. They helped pack my things into a suitcase, making sure to bring along the new peak flow meter and medications Dr. Mercer had prescribed. On the drive back to Bellevue, I looked out the window at the trees rushing past along the road. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the pressure of having to look at Haley for permission just to breathe. That first night at Veronica's house, Mrs. Ramirez prepared a small room for me with ocean blue sheets and a study desk where she placed a clear plastic box containing all of my medications. She pointed at it and said gently, "This is yours. Only yours. No one will take it away, no one will hide it." I broke down crying, not from pain, but because for the first time I had ownership over my own breath. The day I returned to Rainier High, the atmosphere felt completely different. I still remember that morning clearly, the hallways filled with the echo of sneakers slapping against polished tile floors, laughter mixing with the clang of locker doors. But this time, instead of walking in with the familiar silence surrounding me, I carried an official plan in my hand, an accommodation plan. Similar to a 504 program for students with special health conditions, the person who drafted it was Mrs. Olivia Watson, the school counselor, a woman with curly hair and glasses who always spoke to me with eyes free of judgment. In a private meeting that lasted over an hour, Olivia sat beside me, spreading the papers across the desk and using a yellow highlighter to mark the key clauses. According to this plan, I had the right to carry my inhaler at all times, everywhere, even in class or during exams. I could leave the classroom at any moment if I felt short of breath, without needing permission. I was also granted the option to submit assignments late or receive extended test time if asthma interfered with my learning. "This is not special treatment," Olivia emphasized. "It's a medical right recognized under federal law." I nodded, fighting back tears. That very day, a faculty memo was sent to every teacher and health staff member at the school. In the email, Olivia wrote clearly, "Student, Madison Lee. Condition, asthma with history of severe neglect. Protocol, never restrict access to medication. Never question her symptoms. Respect immediate exit from class if necessary." I read and reread every word, feeling as though I finally had a shield protecting me in an environment that had always suffocated me, not just literally, but emotionally too. Yet, alongside the official support from the school, my personal conflict with Haley began to escalate publicly. On Monday afternoon, while I was gathering books at my locker, Haley suddenly appeared behind me and slammed the locker door shut right next to my face. She leaned in close, her cold hand clamping around my wrist like a vice, her sharp nails pressed deep, leaving burning red marks. "Are you trying to turn me into a monster in front of the whole school?" Haley hissed, her eyes flashing with a mix of panic and hatred. I tried to pull my hand free, but couldn't. The entire hallway froze. Students nearby began whispering, and phones were immediately pulled out to record. I stayed silent, only glancing toward the nurse's office nearby. A teacher stepped in just in time, pulling Haley away. I was taken straight to the nurse's office. Nurse Callahan didn't say much. She simply took the school camera, photographed the nail marks embedded in my skin, then filled out an incident report. "This goes straight to the file," she said firmly. I knew the wounds would fade in a few days, but that photo would remain forever. The trouble didn't stop in the hallway. That evening, Instagram and TikTok were flooded with clips of Haley clawing at my wrist. The comment section exploded. Half defended Haley, saying I loved playing the victim, that it was just sibling drama. The other half was furious. She almost died. And Haley still does this? The war of words split the entire school into two camps. Anonymous messages started pouring into my phone, mocking and threatening me. I felt overwhelmed, but this time I wasn't alone. Veronica sat beside me the whole time, blocking accounts that attacked me, encouraging me. Maddie, let them talk. The truth will stand on its own. In the middle of all that chaos, Rowan came to me with new evidence. He had dug through old messages on his phone from 2 years ago, back when Haley had bragged about keeping me from seeing a doctor just to see how long she could last. In one chat, Haley even added a laughing crying emoji. It's hilarious. She begs, but I just say no. She can wait. Rowan had saved all of it, and now he handed it to me. Reading those words, I felt both cold and strange, not surprised at Haley's cruelty, but shaken because the truth had finally been written out in her own hand. Olivia later asked me to submit copies of these messages so they could be added to the record. Electronic evidence carries more weight than any retelling, she explained. I could clearly see how the legal and educational systems were beginning to move around me, placing me at the center of protection rather than suspicion for the very first time. But beneath the aggression and the cruel words, I started to recognize something I had never considered before. Haley's fear. She didn't just want to silence me, she was terrified of losing the spotlight she had owned for so many years. All of Haley's value, from modeling contracts, social media, even our parents' adoration, was tied to a kind of invisible asset Olivia called image capital. And now, with me gaining rightful attention from teachers and authorities, that capital was crumbling. Haley didn't know how to respond except to grip me tighter, literally and figuratively, in a desperate attempt to hold on to the glittering light slipping through her fingers. That night, as I sat in Veronica's living room, I picked up the peak flow meter and blew into it. The numbers still fell in the yellow range, but unlike all the years before, this time I could inhale without fear of someone stopping me. I wrote in my journal, "My breath, my right. No one can take it away anymore." And I knew the battle with Haley was far from over, but the balance had started to shift, and it would play out at the protective order hearing. That morning, I sat in the courthouse waiting room, my heart pounding like a drum. Beside me was attorney Sarah Alcott, a woman with neatly tied brown hair, thin-rimmed glasses, and a voice that carried both firmness and reassurance. Sarah had spent the entire week preparing me, teaching me how to answer briefly, how to sit with my back straight, and even how to slow my breathing when anxiety rose. On the table in front of me, I clutched a packet of printed evidence: the audio recording of my parents threatening to cut my college fund, the photos of the injuries Haley had left on my skin, the old messages Rowan had recovered, and the summary of the action plan signed by Dr. Mercer. The courtroom was small, with a high ceiling and light filtering through windows draped with heavy curtains. When I walked in, I saw my parents already seated at the opposite table, their faces drawn tight. My father wore a wrinkled gray suit, my mother her familiar pearl necklace, but her hands were clenched, trembling slightly. They avoided my eyes, yet I could see the fire of anger pressed down beneath their silence. Haley sat directly behind them, her face pale, her blonde curls hastily tied back, stripped of the pride she always displayed in glossy ads. The hearing opened with the judge, a senior woman wearing reading glasses on a silver chain. She flipped through the file, her voice raspy but clear. "We have evidence that the parents delegated the medical decisions of a child to another child. Is that correct?" She stressed each word, letting the weight of the question hang in the air. My father stammered. It was just a way of managing things at home, Your Honor. Haley knows her sister best." But Sarah immediately rose to her feet. "Your Honor, there is no statute that allows parents to abandon their duty of care and transfer it to a 16-year-old child. This is systemic neglect, resulting in severe harm and 4 minutes of cardiac arrest." The judge fell silent, her eyes fixed firmly on my parents. Then she set down her pen and signed the order. From that moment on, I held full medical authority. No one, not even my parents, could interfere with my right to take medication or seek treatment. My parents were restricted to supervised visits only, monitored either by CPS or a neutral adult. And in bold print, there was a specific clause: No harassment banning any threats, pressure, or attempts to strip away my rights. Sarah squeezed my shoulder gently and whispered, "Maddie, you now have the shield of the law." Right after the hearing, ADA Nolan Graves, a young prosecutor with tousled black hair and dark circles from long nights of work, approached me. He leaned in, his voice low but steady. "We've gathered enough to pursue charges of child endangerment. Depending on the additional investigation and whether intent can be proven, will determine if this rises to a misdemeanor or a felony. But make no mistake, your parents' actions placed you at risk of death." I only nodded, trembling yet relieved for the first time someone had called the truth by its name. As for Haley, that very week the school held an internal disciplinary hearing. I was invited to sit with Olivia and the principal, while Haley and our parents were also present. One by one, the teachers read through the reports, Haley clawing my wrist in the hallway, repeatedly blocking my path, along with the viral clip circulating online. In the end, the school decided to suspend Haley from all extracurricular activities, including student council, the debate club, and the cheer team. She broke down in tears, screaming that I had destroyed her life. But this time, no one defended her. I simply kept my eyes on the table, saying nothing, letting the silence speak for itself. The harshest blow for Haley wasn't the school's decision, it was the reaction from the outside world. The Seattle modeling agency that had promised her a contract after her Sweet 16 sent an official email withdrawing their interest. The reason was written clearly. "We cannot partner with a candidate entangled in serious ethical misconduct that would damage brand reputation." Overnight, Haley's social media posts shifted from polished studio shots to angry, desperate rants. I read the line. "She ruined everything. My sister ruined my life." But I knew the truth. Haley hadn't just lost a career opportunity, she had lost the image capital she had fought so hard to protect. Once the Golden Star celebrated across school, she had become the central figure in a moral scandal, whispered about in every hallway. For Haley, that was the harshest punishment of all. The collapse of the spotlight she had clung to for so long. That night, when I returned to Veronica's house, I picked up the peak flow meter and blew a long breath. The reading shot up to 320, not yet in the green zone, but much higher than before. I sat by the window, looking out at Seattle's night sky draped over the glow of the freeway, and realized I had just crossed a milestone. For the first time in my life, the court had placed my breath back into my own hands, and those who had taken it away were beginning to pay the price. The day of the formal trial came faster than I expected. That morning, I stood in front of the mirror in Veronica's living room, gripping a packet of papers stamped with the title Victim Impact Statement. No glittering earrings, no elaborate dress I wore, only a white button-down shirt and black slacks, forcing myself to appear calm. But inside, every heartbeat thudded like a drum. I knew that this time I wasn't just telling my story, I had to show the court the cost they had forced me to pay all these years. The King County courtroom was packed. At the opposite table, my father sat hunched, his old suit wrinkled. My mother dabbed at her eyes with tissues, glancing around as if searching for someone to sympathize with her. Haley, in a gray cardigan, sat in the back row, her eyes vacant, her hair messy and unbrushed. In front of them sat their defense attorney in a shiny gray suit, his expression cold and unmoved. When the judge called my name, my legs trembled, but I did not stop walking. I stood at the wooden podium and looked straight at the jury. My voice rang out, steady and clear. "My name is Madison Lee. I am 16 years old." I stopped breathing for 4 minutes right in my living room because my parents refused to call for emergency help. It was not an accident. It was not a misunderstanding. This was the result of a house rule my parents put in place when I was 12. Every medical decision about me had to be approved by my sister Haley. I begged. I had an asthma attack. They saw my lips turn blue, yet they still asked Haley. And Haley said, "She's faking." The result was clinical death for 4 minutes. I survived because my friend performed CPR. I carry permanent scars in my lungs and in my memory. I paused, took a breath, then continued. But the harm is not only medical. I grew up in a home where even my breath had to ask permission. I learned that my safety always came second to someone else's image. Today, I stand here not to ask for pity. I stand here to declare, no child should ever be stripped of the right to live because their parents value perfection over health. I closed my packet of papers and stepped down. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the clerk's pen tapping. After me came a string of witnesses. Veronica went up first. In a simple navy dress, she opened a worn notebook and spoke with steady certainty. I checked Maddie's pulse and saw her heart rate over 160, her skin pale, her lips blue. I shouted respiratory failure. Her father grabbed the phone and said, "No calling 911 until Haley permits." I had to start CPR myself. I believe that without medical intervention, Maddie would have died that day. Next was Rowan. He played a clip taken from his behind-the-scenes camera, the sound of wheezing, my begging, and my father's firm voice. "Ask Haley first." The audio echoed through the courtroom and made many people shiver. He also read aloud the messages Haley had sent him, mocking the idea of keeping me from going to the doctor. The judge frowned, and the jurors scribbled notes nonstop. A lighting technician from the party also testified. He had accidentally recorded the chaotic audio when I collapsed and heard Haley say, "She's faking, don't ruin my party." His voice trembled as he spoke, but the truth rang out unmistakably. Then Nurse Amanda, who had entered notes directly into the electronic health record, took the stand. She read aloud, verbatim. "Patient reports medical decisions require sibling approval. Noted as forensic entry." Those lines, stamped with time codes by the system, became a final blade against my parents' wall of denial. Finally, Dr. Elias Mercer was called as an expert witness. He projected an X-ray of my lungs onto the large screen, white scarring that proved my illness had been neglected. He explained in medical terms clear enough for everyone to understand. Asthma that is not properly treated leaves permanent damage. In Madison's case, repeated delays in treatment placed her at risk of death multiple times. In the most recent episode, her heart stopped for 4 minutes, and her brain could have suffered irreversible injury. This was not random. This was a pattern of neglect. He concluded firmly. As a physician, I must state without fundamental change, the next time could be actual death. After many days of arguments, prosecution and defense reached a deal. ADA Nolan Graves announced before the court, defendants Thomas Lee and Angela Lee agreed to plead guilty to child endangerment, reduced to avoid prison time, but including 18 months of mandatory parenting classes, compliance monitored by CPS, 200 hours of community service, and, most importantly, the conviction will remain on their criminal record, directly affecting future employment and housing eligibility. The judge struck her gavel, her gaze stern. The court approves. However, I am extending the protective order. From this point forward, Haley Lee as well as the parents will permanently have no authority whatsoever over Madison's medical decisions. Any violation will be considered contempt of court and may result in jail time. In that moment, I didn't feel triumph, nor did I cry. I simply felt a quiet calm spread through me like the first time I blew into the peak flow meter and saw the needle rise into the green zone. My parents lowered their heads. Haley sobbed that her career was ruined. But this time, their voices carried no weight. The law had spoken for me. They had paid the price. That night, back in my small room at Veronica's house, I opened the window and looked out over Bellevue's lights. For the first time, the cool Seattle air no longer pressed heavily on my chest but flowed freely into my lungs. I wrote in my journal, "I have reclaimed my breath. No one can take it away again." 3 months after the trial, my life began to settle into a new orbit, one I had never dared to imagine under the so-called house rule. At each follow-up appointment with Dr. Mercer, he had me blow into the peak flow meter and compared the results. The numbers that once hovered around 240, 250, only about 60% lung function, had steadily risen to 360, 370. He smiled, tapping the printed chart lightly. "Madison, this is clear evidence that when treated properly, your body can recover. You're approaching 90% of normal function. And more importantly, you no longer have to wait for anyone's permission to breathe. Those words felt like a milestone, reminding me that taking back control had saved my life. At Veronica's house, her family and I set up a medical station right in the spare living room. It was a small wooden cabinet. The top shelf neatly held boxes of medication, spacers, rescue, and maintenance inhalers. The lower shelf contained a nebulizer machine, tubing, and masks that were sterilized and ready to use. Next to it stood a mini fridge for solutions that needed cold storage. On top of the cabinet, Mrs. Ramirez placed a clear plastic box with my brand new peak flow meter and a logbook for me to record readings every morning and every night. One weekend, the three of us went to the pharmacy together and had a stainless steel medical bracelet engraved for me. Asthma, inhaler dependent, emergency contact. Ramirez family. Wearing that bracelet felt like a talisman, a reminder to myself and a public declaration that I had the right and the means to protect my own life. At school, Olivia Watson continued to stand by me. One afternoon, she spread a stack of blue folders across her desk and said, "We're going to create a complete safety file." She divided it into sections. Legal copies of the protective order and court documents. Medical. Dr. Mercer's medical opinion and my hospital discharge papers. And emergency contacts, numbers for CPS, my attorney Sarah, Dr. Mercer, and the Ramirez family. She even scanned everything onto a small USB drive and handed it to me with a clear instruction. Keep one copy on your person, one in your locker at school, and one at home. I added a final page to the packet titled, "Personal Statement, My Medical Rights Belong to Me." Even though it was only a few typed pages, signing my name felt like signing my life back. Olivia also encouraged me to start writing my college essay. Tell your story, but not just as a victim. Write about your strength, she said. So I began typing the first lines. For 4 minutes, my heart stopped. But when I woke, I realized I didn't want my story to stop there. I wrote about the journey from being neglected to learning how to manage my illness on my own, from having to ask permission to take medication to creating my own medical action plan. When I finished, I realized it wasn't just an essay, it was a declaration that I had survived, and that I was stronger. Olivia sent me a list of scholarships for students who had endured hardship. For the first time, I saw a future ahead of me that wasn't defined by fear. In my relationships, the strange thing was how I found normalcy again with Rowan. He was no longer the boy Haley used to pull into her orbit, but once more the friend who used to build Lego sets with me as a kid. Whenever we went to lunch, Rowan would always ask, "Do you have your inhaler?" At first I laughed, but eventually I realized it wasn't control, it was care. We talked about homework, about college plans, about dreams for the future, things I had never really had the chance to share with anyone outside of books. As for Haley, late one night, I received a message on Instagram. The words were cold. "Maddie, I think there have been a lot of misunderstandings. I never wanted you to be hurt. No apology, no admission. Just a vague attempt to erase the past with the word misunderstanding." I sat staring at the screen for a few minutes, then turned it off. No reply. No more blame, no more waiting. Because I knew the peace I had today came from the boundaries I had built, and answering that message would only open the door back to chaos. One evening, I sat alone in Veronica's living room with 5 identical printed copies of a document titled Declaration of Autonomy spread across the table. I wrote it like an oath, 3 concise pages and to the point. All medical decisions concerning my body and my breath are my right. No one else, including family members, has the authority to decide on my behalf. I respect care and concern, but control over my health is inviolable. I signed at the end, made 5 copies. One went into the safety file, one was placed in the medical station cabinet with my medications, one stayed in my school backpack, one was sent to Dr. Mercer, and one was tucked away in my bedside drawer. Seeing the 5 sheets neatly aligned, I felt a lightness I had never known before. No longer a girl begging for the right to breathe, I had officially declared my right to live. One early autumn morning, I woke before dawn, slipped into a light jacket, and took the bus up to Cary Park for the best panoramic view of Seattle. The air was still crisp, a thin mist hung low, and the city unfurled in the morning sun, the Space Needle rising like a symbol of resilience. I leaned against the railing, closed my eyes, and took a deep breath. This time there was no wheeze, no feeling of sucking air through a straw. It was simply cool, full air filling my chest, clear and expansive. I opened my eyes and saw a congratulatory email on my phone. You have been awarded a scholarship for students overcoming hardship with a pre-med focus. In that instant, I laughed through my tears. The dream of becoming pre-med, studying to heal, to save children whose medical voices were once taken away like mine, suddenly felt within reach. Looking back, I understand this story is not mine alone. It is a message for anyone living in families that seem normal on the outside but are filled with invisible violence inside. Arbitrary rules, silenced voices, breaths dismissed as pretending. I want the audience, those listening, those reading, to understand that a true family is not a place where you must beg just to survive. A true family is a place where your boundaries are respected, where your body and safety are heard. Justice is not found only in a courtroom. Justice is also when we strip away the poison of invisible control and reclaim peace within ourselves. They're paying the price. That phrase didn't just apply in the moment of sentencing, but in the long echo afterward. My parents, after 18 months of mandatory parenting classes, eventually completed the program. But the criminal record still clings to them. Every time they apply for a job or try to rent housing, the box for criminal record reminds them that their choices left an indelible scar. The father who once prided himself on being a manager now scrapes by with part-time odd jobs. The mother who once believed in projecting a perfect family image now struggles through temporary clerical work. They did not go to prison, but they lost the thing they valued most: honor and trust in the eyes of the community. As for Haley, the spotlight she once lived and died for has collapsed completely. The online community has turned away, friends have distanced themselves. The condition for her to even be considered for reinstatement into school activities was mandatory participation in a school health mentoring program. There, Haley was forced to sit and listen to experts explain the importance of putting safety above image and to write a reflection paper on the consequences of her choices. For someone who lived for the camera's flash, that was a punishment more bitter than any public criticism. I, on the other hand, stepped into a new chapter. I had a safe home with the Ramirez family, a loyal friend in Veronica, a steady presence in Rowan, and more importantly, I had myself. I no longer defined who I was through my parents' indifference or Haley's contempt. I defined myself through every free breath, every step closer to my dream. The day I left Cary Park, I glanced back at the city one more time, the final words of my Declaration of Autonomy echoing in my mind. I chose myself, I chose my breath, and in that choice, I found freedom, worth, and a true family. Seattle that morning seemed wider, more open, and I knew that this story, from 4 minutes without a heartbeat to the moment I inhaled fully again, was not just a survival journey. It was the journey of finding myself.